Alright, so today we're going to talk about factoring polynomials. We have already done a lot of factoring when it comes to quadratic functions. So these are the methods that we know. So far we know how to factor using a GCF, a greatest common factor. And so the way that you do that, if you have 12a cubed plus 10a squared, look at your numbers first and see what's the largest number that goes into both of those. So between 12 and 10, the largest number is 2. And then if you look at your variables, you have a cubed and a squared, so the largest you can take out is a squared. And so that will leave you with 6a plus 5. And that's the factored form. For factoring trinomials, when a is 1, that's our normal factoring. So if you have w squared plus w minus 20, you need to find two numbers that will multiply to negative 20, but add to 1. So your factors, or your multiples, magic numbers, whatever you want to call them, is 5 and negative 4. So the way that we factor it is we have w plus 5 and then w minus 4, and that's the factored form. For factoring trinomials, when a is not 1, you have to use the Berry or box method. And so this is kind of like normal factoring. The only extra step is you have to multiply your a times your c. So 3 times negative 5 will give us negative 15. And then we need to find two numbers that will multiply to negative 15 but add to a positive 14. And so your numbers are going to be 15 and negative 1. Now whenever you set up your factored form, this is Berry method. You need to put your Berry in front of each factor there. Plug in your magic numbers, so plus 15, minus 1, and then you need to factor out a Berry. So in this case we need to factor out a 3. I can take it from the first one, and I will get x plus 5, and then 3x minus 1, and then you eat your Berry. So your factored form is x plus 5 and 3x minus 1. Lastly, we have difference of squares. Difference means subtraction. Squares, we have perfect squares. So in this case, 9x squared minus 49y squared. So this is the same as saying 3x squared minus 7y, all of it squared. So your factored form is going to be 3x plus 7y and then 3x minus 7y. So now we've come to the new methods that we're going to learn to factoring polynomials. The first one we're going to talk about is the sum of cubes. And so the sum means addition. So if you have a cubed plus b cubed, this is how it factors. Okay, so a plus b and then times a squared minus ab plus b squared. So let's look at an example. Let's look at x cubed plus 27. So this is the same as saying x cubed plus 3 cubed. So your a and b, your a is x and your b is 3. So we just plug those into the formula there. So we will have a plus b, so x plus 3, and then a squared, so x squared, minus a times b, so x times 3 is 3x, plus b squared, 3 squared is 9. And that's your factored form. 9 times out of 10, this will not factor anymore. Okay, so let's look at the difference of cubes. Difference just means subtraction, so same exact concept, except now we have subtraction. So the rule with this one is you have a minus b, and then a squared plus ab plus b squared. Okay, so notice the difference. Over here we have a plus b and then a minus. Here it's a minus and then a plus. So let's look at an example of that one. So let's look at 216k cubed minus 125. So 216 is a perfect square of 6, or perfect cube, I'm sorry, of 6k cubed. Okay, so we'll have 6k quantity cubed minus, and then 125 is a perfect square of 5. So in this case, my a is 6k, and my b is 5. So I just plug those into the formula here. So a minus b, 6k minus 5, a squared. So 6k, all of it squared, is going to be 36k squared, plus a times b. So 6k times 5 is going to give you 30k, and then plus b squared. So 5 squared is 25, and that's your factored form. Alright, so now we're going to look at quartic trinomials. Quartic means that your exponent is 4. And so one thing to notice is there has to be a pattern. It has to be to the 4th, to the 2nd, and then no variable there, okay? So whenever you have a setup like this, we're going to do a little bit of substitution. So we are going to say that a is equal to n squared. So now, if that happens, n to the 4th is going to become, so to get to the 4th power from this exponent here, we need to square our a. Okay, so that means that a squared is going to be n to the 4th. So our polynomial now becomes a squared plus 2a minus 24. There we go. And so now we have turned this quartic trinomial into a quadratic. And so we would just do our normal factoring. Two numbers that will multiply to negative 24, but add to 2. So we will have 6 and negative 4. So I'm going to plug in my magic numbers here. So a plus 6 and then a minus 4. At this point in time, since you have everything factored, now we need to substitute in the n's. Okay, so since a is n squared, we will have n squared plus 6 and then n squared minus 4. At this point, always look to see if you can factor it more. I can't factor n squared plus 6 anymore, but I can factor n squared minus 4. That's a difference of squares. So n squared plus 6, 4 is a perfect square of 2, so we will have n plus 2 and n minus 2, and that's your factored form. The last method we're going to talk about today is called factoring by grouping. This is whenever you have 4 terms, okay? So I've laid out the steps. So the first step is you are going to group your first 2 terms and then your last 2 terms together. So we're just going to put parentheses around these guys, and then always make sure that there's a plus sign in between. And then if you need to factor out a negative, you can, okay? But the plus sign just makes it easier to keep track of that negative. So I have my groups factored here, so let me just rewrite them so it's clear. Plus, and then negative 4x minus 4. So now you're going to factor out a greatest common factor from each group. So from x cubed plus x squared, my greatest common factor is x squared, and that will leave me with x plus 1. Plus, now my greatest common factor from negative 4x minus 4 is going to be negative 4. And so you will have x plus 1. The goal with factoring by grouping is that what's left inside the parentheses here are exactly the same. So if that's the case, then you just factor the common binomial. So what we're going to do is whatever's the same inside the parentheses, we're going to write it once. And then whatever is left in front, that is going to be our second factor. So we have x plus 1 and then x squared minus 4. Always see if you can factor it more. X squared minus 4 is a difference of squares. So this will factor to x plus 2 and x minus 2. And that is your factored form.